All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to this ARZA Rabbinic Council call. We recognize there might be some others on the call, and we are grateful to have you as a part of this conversation. I just wanted to introduce Dr. Stein. I also wanted to tell you a little bit about why we created this program and a little bit about the Rabbinic Council. Dr. Ken Stein is professor of contemporary Middle Eastern history, political science, and Israeli studies. He's taught at Emory University since 1977. He holds a joint appointment in the History and Political Science Department. His scholarship focuses on the origins of the modern Arab world, American foreign policy toward the Middle East, origins of modern Israel and Palestinian social history, evolution of the conflict, and all aspects of the Arab-Israeli negotiating process. In 2008, Dr. Stein created the Center for Israel Education, CIE, in order to enhance professional development and curriculum writing and workshops for high school teachers, clergy, students, staff of professional organizations across our country. Temple Bethel, here in Charlotte, North Carolina, of which I'm blessed to be an emerita rabbi, has integrated some of CIE's curriculum into our religious school. And it was when my son Maxwell, he got back from EIE in Israel, and a program was offered for 20 of his fellow alums signed up for this program to become Israel educators. And when I saw the curriculum that they were creating and that they were facilitating this great program, we as a Rabbinic Council had this idea that perhaps we could create an adult ed program, the curriculum for our rabbis. I'm now a new professor, and so I know firsthand that teaching a great class requires many steps. There's study, there's compiling the right academic resources, there's designing creative activities to maximize engagement with the materials, and lastly, there is the teaching. And so we wanted to bring to our rabbis and professionals in the Reform community materials to make those steps easier for each one of you, for each one of us. And so we commissioned the Center for Israel Education to do that. Using context and original sources, CIE tells the whole story of how Jews took destiny into their own hands. They convert original source materials and texts into multiple pathways and platforms for learning, as you will see today. Just a brief word about the ARZA Rabbinic Council. We are committed as a council to getting good sources and resources into rabbis' hands. And we thought that this spring, leading up to the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War, would be an ideal time to commission such a curriculum for our rabbis and educators to offer as part of their spring adult education program. We invite all rabbis to join our Rabbinic Council. We provide tools and resources to support our rabbis and rabbinate, and we, vice versa, exist as a platform for rabbis to support Reform Judaism in Israel. On a technical, just to cover one technical issue for this call, we ask that you put your phones and computers on mute because there's a lot of people on this call. And at the end of Dr. Stein's presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. So please use your chat function and send your questions to Neil, and Neil will present them to Ken. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. Just one more thing. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone joining us. Two things about the webinar that you should know. One, the chat function. If you're chatting to an individual, make sure you're chatting to that individual and you're not chatting to everyone. And the call is being recorded so that you don't have to scribble furiously and notes, and we'll be able to send it out to everyone again. Thank you guys so much for joining, and Yishar Koach to Judy and to Ken who made this possible.
Thank you very much, Josh. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Neil, for making the arrangements that allows us to do this. It's a very exciting enterprise for us. It fits exactly with our purpose of trying to teach context and perspective when it comes to understanding the history, politics, and society of modern Israel. This webinar is aimed at explaining the unit, the June 1967 war, how it changed Israeli, Jewish, and Middle Eastern history. It's aimed at educators, clergy, and institutional representatives who are seeking a taste of the webinar taste of the unit in order to find out its contents and its applicability to their environments. In this webinar, I want to show you some of the contents and also explain to you that the contents itself, the contents of the unit, is comprised of two parts. One is a leader's guide, and one is a participant booklet. Both of them will be available around mid-February on our website, www.israeled.org, and you'll be able to download them at that time. Why should we write such a unit? Well, I think Judy explained a little bit about the anniversary of the June War, but all of our work at the Center for Israel Education aims at creating an understanding that today's history or today's events didn't come out of yesterday's event, but probably had a precedent to it. The 50th anniversary of the June War comes this June, and we believe that there will be a lot of discussion, both in the Jewish community and in the non-Jewish community, about what the war has done, what the war has brought, and what is unfinished about it, both for Jews and non-Jews, for diplomats, for history buffs, and for those who want to look back to the future. To see what unfolded in May, June '67 that altered and changed Israeli, Jewish, and Middle Eastern history. Given the polarized nature in which history is sometimes discussed, perhaps even taught, perhaps even blogged about, a look at the causes and effect of the June War are very important, using impeccable sources. We, unlike others, do not have alternate facts. We have just the facts. My delight in writing this, and with the assistance of my good friends here at the Center for Israel Education, Rich Walter, Eli Sperling, Ronnie Eschel, Heather Walters, is to provide a reminder to some and an introduction to others about how this event is a benchmark, how it's a turning point in the region. Sources for the unit come from articles, books, archives that I've used over the years in teaching modern Israel, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and the modern Middle East. And most recently, over the last 10 to 20 years, of course, we've had access to archives online, which has made life a lot easier. Not everything's digitized, but some of it is. So when we take a look at the events of June 1967, you see the left slide, the map. It's a map that deals with Israel in 47, Israel in 67, and Israel after the 1973 war. The shades tell you the difference. The second map in the middle is taken from Michael Oren's book, the June War, the Six-Day War, and it shows you exactly how Israel attacked on that morning of June 5th at about 7:45 in the morning. It shows you that they went out over the Mediterranean and flew back in behind the 11 air bases that the Israelis hit. And something like the first 2.5 hours, the war was over because the Israelis had destroyed the Egyptian Air Force, and the Israelis now could use their aircraft as flying artillery to protect their ground troops. And the right-hand photograph is a very famous photograph of Rabbi Shlomo Goren at the wall, blowing the shofar, just maybe the 5th or 6th day after the war started. Two very different kinds of celebration, two very different kinds of reaction to the war. The first, the Allenby Bridge, refugees from the West Bank moving across into Jordan. And then there's a photograph of Jews joyously dancing in the street. Why a unit on the June War? I think all of us who study history understand that there are moments in history that are just dots on a timeline. And then there are also those that are benchmarks, turning points, maybe even create legacies. And I would suggest that this is one of those events in history that creates a legacy. Much like December 7th of 41, or the Shah's fall, or 9/11, because there was a right-hand turn was taken in history. And the outcome of that right-hand turn is still yet to be known, and that's why we wanted to do the unit, because a lot that occurred in May, June of 67, we already know what the outcomes were. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good. But many of them will remain unfinished. What we do know are the following. We do know that it solidified Israel's existence as a nation state. It promoted Arab national interests. It altered Israeli politics, particularly on the Israeli right. It changed Israel's relationship with the diaspora in a very significant way, and relationship with the great powers and American Jewry and the US government. It unleashed Arab-Israeli diplomacy in a manner that no one had anticipated. No one would have expected that Lyndon Johnson, as president, would have said to the Israelis 2 weeks after the war, we're not going back to the status quo before the war. It had always been American policy that if people went to war, they were going to go back to where the war started. Lyndon Johnson said, however, this time if Israel is going to withdraw from Sinai like it did in 57, this time Israel should end up with an agreement with its Arab allies. And it's out of Johnson's pushing and his advice that the whole concept of land for peace emerges. And the unleashing of Arab-Israeli diplomacy came about because Nasser lost Sinai. If Nasser hadn't lost Sinai, Sadat wouldn't have gone to Jerusalem, or Sadat wouldn't have gone to war in October of 1973 to start a diplomatic process that would ultimately have allowed him to get Sinai back. In other words, the loss of Sinai was the motivation for Sadat's trip to Jerusalem, and from that, Israel, of course, was able to gain a very strategic treaty with the Arab world's most populous country. And I think it's fair to say that the war led to very intense debate amongst Jews in Israel and in the diaspora and across the world, and non-Jews across the world, about the validity and the consequences of Jewish presence in the territories and of the whole settlement enterprise. These are topics which we hope to cover in the unit. On your left are the General Amr and President Nasser, two gentlemen who were very close together for many, many years. And it's General Amr, who was head of the military, and Nasser, of course, who was president of Egypt, who suffered a tremendous blow as a result of the Six-Day War. On the right is General Ezra Weitzman, who was deputy chief of staff to Yitzhak Rabin at the time. He had previously been head of the Air Force. And of course, Moshe Dayan, who comes into Israeli government in June of 1967 as part of a national unity government. That whole story about what happens in May and June will be covered in the unit with a timeline, a very detailed timeline of May and June. And what are some of our source examples which we want to use in the unit? We want to use documents, speeches that tell the story. And the leader or director or educator who's going to drive the discussion should be able to use these materials to have the audiences, their students, their adult education participants, campers in a summer camp. They should be able to use this material accessible online, accessible on our website, to learn about what was going on both before and after the war. And then, thank heavens, or thank the world that I don't have to go down to Texas, I can have access to the LBJ library, I can have access to the Johnson administration, and we all can have access to very important documentation about what happened during the war, before the war, and after the war. So that not only does the unit provide you with very particular tools for teaching and for learning, but it allows one who's an archive enthusiast or someone who just doesn't want to stop learning the opportunity to go further and further. This is from the Office of Historian, Foreign Relations of the United States. This will all be available in the bibliography in the unit that will be providing not only to the leader or the leader's guide, but also to the participants as well. We feel that it's not just the leader who's going to drive the discussion or drive the learning, but we believe the participant who's sitting there learning should have that same opportunity to explore further and deeper as much as they want. Here are some of the sources that I've used in preparation for this particular unit. Some of them you may recognize, some of them you may fully understand and may have seen before. One of the seminal works is, all of these will appear in the bibliography. One of the seminal works is on the top left, Michael Oren's 6 Days of War. The central book that many of us still use to describe Zionism and its origin is Arthur Herzberg's Zionist Idea. Nadav Safran wrote the book on the far right, Israel, the Embattled Ally, and he's got maybe 75 pages in this very large book that deal just with the 6-Day War. One of the best summaries ever. Can't copy it because it would be violating a copyright privilege. But I can point it out to you in the bibliography. So if someone wanted to go out and pick up Israel, the Embattled Ally, they could then go ahead and do their own reading. Middle East Record was done by the precursor of the Dayan Center. It's 580 pages long of just 1967. It's the most detailed day-by-day statement of what happened in the Middle East in 67 and in the 6-Day War. Phenomenal piece. I don't think you can get it even in used books anymore. It's just not available. It's so precious. And then on the right side, you have the memoirs of Nasser, you have biography of Nasser, you got Anita Shapira's classic book on Israel, a History, Peace Process by Quant. So the bibliography is not just about the war. The bibliography is about things that happened before the war, during the war, and after the war. So someone could walk away from this and really have a reading list for a couple of years, or a lot of time at the beach if they have that opportunity to spend there. So what are the contents of the unit? What in the five, if we divide this into 5 sessions, what are the 5 sessions? And here what I've tried to do, I've tried to outline in a very quick way the lead up to June 4th, 67, the war and the aftermath to November 79. And why 79? Because it's after the Egyptian-Israeli treaty, and it's before the fall of it's before the taking of the hostages in Iran. The June War and its aftermath is terribly important, simply because the aftermath shapes the negotiations that follow and the emergence of UN Resolution 242, which comes in November 67. Israel and the territories, the whole question of what did Israel want? Did Israel go to war in order to conquer the territories? Did it make a decision after it conquered the territories? What kind of territories, what kind of decisions did it make? Did it change over time? For some, it was a liberation. For Gush Emunim, we know it was a liberation. For the members of the Yeshiv Merkaz of Rav Kook, it was definitely a liberation. It was a time to restore Eretz Yisrael to all the Jewish people and no longer have it in the hands of anyone else or any other sovereignty. And then the whole question of settlements. How did they evolve? What impact has it had upon Israel? Israel in the negotiating process, a whole unit, I think, will be provided here dealing with Arab-Israeli negotiations. How does it unfold? How did Kissinger and Carter get a hold of it? What did Begin and later on Shamir and Peres and Netanyahu say about it? And then the unfinished components of the war. This is a war where we still have questions that are outstanding. Israel's borders are outstanding. Israel's relationship with the territories is outstanding. The very nature of diaspora Jewish relations with the state of Israel and how the territories plays a role in shaping or distancing or embracing Israel. That's all very, very relevant. The June War, participant booklet. This is pretty much what it's going to look like. These are the contents which we'll find not only in the participant booklet, but we'll also find these in the Leader's Guide as well. Pretty self-contained. The prose, the glossary, the biographies are all brand new written. It's not slid or taken from Wikipedia or Jewish Virtual Library. I've written all of these originally. I started doing this about 6 weeks ago, and it's about 75% finished, I'm happy to say. And the timeline. Everything that is in the participants book will also be in the Leader's Guide. And what's in the Leader's Guide? Guiding questions, suggested answers, open-ended discussions. Is a two-state solution viable? What would unilateral withdrawal mean? If you were to revise 242, what does that do to negotiations? And suggested uses on how to use the other materials. Here is an example of the biographies that will be in the units. Chosen 30 people, Americans, members of the UN, King Hussein, Nasser, the Israeli leadership, all in an effort to bring to bear to the uninitiated some understanding of who these people were. The glossaries will be referred to, the biographies will be referred to in the prose, so a person can see the name U Thant, it'll be underlined, and the person can click to the underline, and they can go directly to the biography and read about U Thant. Or if they don't want to read about U Thant, they can continue to read directly for the rest of the prose. And Levi Eshkol too. The interesting part about some of the biographies, what I've tried to do is to give the reader a sample of a particular document or speech in which that individual was particularly noted. Eshkol gave a couple of speeches prior to the June 1967 war, some of them on radio, one on radio that was extraordinarily halting, which created a measure of consternation in the Israeli public about was the Israeli government ready for this coming conflict. But in any case, the whole purpose of the biographies is to allow the individual that's going to use it to get a sense of who these people were. What we try and do when we teach history is try and catapult people back to that moment in time. And that's what we're trying to do with this, is catapult people back to the moment in time so they get a glimpse, a feel for what it was. The timeline is a timeline example of Eshkol, May 23rd, 1967. The timeline is patterned after the timeline which we use on our website. Another one on Israel's extension of its Jerusalem borders. And one of the things I've tried to do in the unit is move not only from the 67 period, but to jump down to the more contemporary. We're all familiar with the UN resolution that was passed in December of last year, the one that the United States vetoed, UN 2334. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to indicate to the reader that an event that occurred 50 years ago, there's still controversy and discussion about what Israel did then as compared to what, let's say, the United Nations would prefer Israel to do or not to do today. So that there's a connection, there's an intellectual connection about Jerusalem. Bibliography examples. Some of them are just incredibly good. This is not the first time individuals have tried to look at anniversaries in studying history. There was, as early as the 25th anniversary of the Six-Day War, a conference that took place at Wayne State University. And there have been several conferences ever since. In 2007, our good friend David Makovsky wrote a superb, very short analysis of the consequences of the 1967 war. And here are just some of the summaries that Makovsky wrote back then. And those summaries still have relevance today. So there's no reason why the Makovsky article shouldn't be included in our bibliography, because it's a wonderful summary for anyone who wants to understand that these issues have not yet been resolved. They're still outstanding. And the notion that the superpowers have somehow left the Middle East after the end of the Cold War, well, we know that there's at least one superpower who's involved in the Middle East today in a very active way physically, and we know that there's another one that is eager to get back involved in the negotiating process in a substantive way should Arab-Israeli negotiations unfold again. But still it's the question of what was the consequences for the superpowers. There will be PowerPoints for the leader. And for example, we'll point out what were Israel's intentions prior to the war. What did Israel seek, or what did it not seek? What was it trying to do, or what was it not trying to do? And this will be very good for anyone who's guiding the discussion to just merely present to the learners, present to the participants, present to the peers. What is exactly that was going on? This will not be provided to in the booklet to the participants, but strictly to the learners. And it'll be provided in a PowerPoint format. And there'll be about 3 or 4 PowerPoints like this that will cover the topics that are in the unit. I've used all of these PowerPoints in class. I've used them over and over again, tried to refine them over time. This is not the first time, actually, that I've used them, but I think it's very relevant because it allows one to see the context and the perspective of what happened in '67. Results for Jews and Israelis. What did the war not do? And that is most important, as well as understanding what the war did do, what it did accomplish. And again, each one of these, if a leader wishes, can just stop and just have a discussion of what was delegitimization of Israel in the post-'67 period? What was before '67? What was it before Israel was created in '48? And then take the whole question of delegitimization down today in any direction that a rabbi or a unit leader may decide. So that these are opportunities for an individual who's guiding this to take the discussion in any direction they want, because the ideas that are provided in the PowerPoints are themselves possible topics of lectures. Going into detailed discussion of a particular resolution. We'll have information about the particular resolution. We'll have information about how it came about. We'll have information about how do you use this particular resolution, because it becomes the bedrock, a framework for Arab-Israeli negotiations since. The multiple interpretations of the resolution. And this is specifically for the leader. Take a look at number 2. Why is the French translation of the resolution? What is the French translation of the resolution? And why would supporters of an Arab view use the French rather than the English version of the resolution? Well, the answer is quite simple, that when you express the word territory in French, you have to put an article in front of it, de territoire. It's not withdrawal from territories, but it's actually withdrawal from des territoires. And when you take the French translation, des territoires, and you translate that back into Arabic, the Arab translation then uses the word the, connoting, of course, withdrawal from all the territories. So those little tidbits may not be relevant, they may be interesting, but they certainly have created a very different understanding of what Resolution 242 is. We know that the English was the official language of the resolution, but we know there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. And how do we know that? Because at the very end of the Camp David Accords in 1978, the very last phrase at the bottom says, English is the official language of this document. We'll go through the facts of 242. I'll take the leader through the alternative interpretation, alternative facts of 242. These are the facts that President Carter put up when he published his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid, in which he completely rewrote 242 because he didn't like the contents. He didn't like the ambiguity. He wanted the precision. Talk about that a little bit in the unit. And what are the implications of full withdrawal as compared to partial withdrawal? And then there's a whole diplomatic earthquake of terms that comes out of '67. These are terms and ideas that never existed, and this will be part of the negotiating section of the unit. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to ask any of you who are out there who would like to type in a question. Be delighted to try and answer it if I possibly can. Thank you for your attention, and I hope I can give you brief answers to your questions.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Neil Gold. I'm Director of Program and Content at ARZA. I want to say thank you and Yasher Koach to Dr. Stein for teaching us. And yeah, people have been submitting some questions to me, and you can continue in the next couple of minutes to submit questions to me through the chat feature on Zoom. Ken, one of the first questions that comes up is, you've done such a good job in this past half hour, and obviously with the materials that you guys have put together. But on the ground, facilitators have to walk a real tightrope in our communities between agenda items, between the left and the political left and the political right. As you say, we just want to present the facts. You want to say a few words to educators and facilitators who are on the call about how they walk that tightrope while presenting the materials in the curriculum?
Yeah, I think most people who know something about the topic will bring to the topic their own points of view about what happened and what has happened since. And no matter what a question is as it's posed by a participant, I think it's a mistake for the teacher or the guide or the person who's directing the lessons to enter into some sort of controversy or raise a question about the legitimacy of a particular person's point of view. I think that's the first thing you shouldn't do. The second thing you probably should do is listen very carefully as to what a person has presented and see if there's something there that needs a slight amendation or a slight correction. The worst thing to do is to get into a confrontation with a student. I've always avoided it in the classroom. I've always asked if the student hasn't really expressed themselves fully, I've asked another question, trying to get them to a second and third level of asking the question. There's no magic formula for skating in between left and right. But when you deal with a particular topic like why Israel went to war, who started the war, you have to then ask the critical question, what does it mean to start a war? I know that sounds almost too simple. But yes, Israel started the war on June 5th. But it started the war on June 5th because it was surrounded, because its lifeline to Eilat was cut, because there were 80,000 Egyptian troops in Sinai, and because Israel has always had a military doctrine that said, let's always fight our war on the other guy's turf, because we're too small to fight it on our turf. Now, that doesn't really answer the question who started the war. What it does is it explains the context of how the war started. And that's how I've always tried to answer questions in the classroom, and that's how I would try here. It's not an easy task. I fully recognize it.
You know, it's interesting because as we've been preparing this curriculum and publicizing it, one of the questions that's been put to me most frequently is I've had some people who say, well, this sounds like it must be a really left-wing thing. And other people who have said to me, well, it sounds really right-wing. So, and I've tried to say sort of the message that you are, that it's about analyzing the facts and being educators and being teachers. I have another question.
Let me just say this. It's a matter of catapulting people back to that event in time, because no one knew in '67 that there would be 500,000 Jews living in the West Bank. No one knew that. No one knew that there would be an emergence of the Israeli right. No one knew that. And what we have to do is we have to somehow take ourselves back into that moment and try and divorce ourselves from what we now know today. I know it's very difficult to do, very difficult. But we as teachers have got to try and do it and keep our own personal views out of it if we possibly
Another question from the point of view of educators, the rabbis and educators and leaders who are on this call. Presumably a lot of the people on this call are interested in being the facilitators of this program in their communities. Presumably most of the people on the call are people who are interested in the topic, who are people who care about Israel and the Middle East and stuff, but aren't necessarily historians. How much pre-existing knowledge does the curriculum demand on behalf of the facilitator?
I think with the prose introduction that will be provided and the directions that will be given to an educator to do some reading, I don't think it'll be too extraordinary or too extensive. There are enough things online which are available that give you a pretty good history up until 48, and again from 48 to 67. May take 100, 150 pages of reading, but it's pretty concise and it's pretty good and it's pretty objective. And it's taken a while to find these, but they exist. So yeah, it may take some effort. I don't think you can just walk into the classroom and just start anew. I think a little bit of reading. I know before this presentation, I spent 4 hours this morning prepping myself for it. And, I've taught this for 40 years. So I'm never fully satisfied with what I know, to be blunt. And I've studied it a lot. So I can imagine why someone else would have that sense of uncertainty. But, you learn by teaching. You really do. And this is a wonderful, the material is so rich. It really is. And you can just fall in love with it. At least I have. That's a 40-year love affair.
You certainly said one of the effects of the '67 war was the growth of Palestinian nationalism and self-identity. Rabbi Jack Pascal from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, asked the question: in that regard, are there Palestinian voices that are part of the curriculum?
Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That's 17604, if I remember from my days at Franklin Marshall. Palestinian voices. There's material from Palestinian writers. There's material from the PLO and from Hamas. And there's material from the Palestinian Authority. More than those voices, I'm not certain. Some Palestinian writers like Isa Khalaf or Rashid Khalidi, in terms of how they've seen history. There's some excerpts. But aside from that, the answer, I don't think I can give you anything more than that.
Okay, I have another question that's been submitted is, with the recognition that this is incredibly new and happening in real time, but does the curriculum give us the opportunity to address the new administration's emphasis to move the capital, I think it means to move the embassy of the United States to Jerusalem? And how was this question shaped by the Six-Day War? All
right, so obviously what you need is, if the question is going to be asked about Jerusalem today, there has to be something in the unit about how Israel annexed Jerusalem at the end of June 1967, how it became part of one of the Israel Basic Laws in July of 1980, and how it was done on behalf of a majority of the state of Israel, a majority of the members of Knesset voted in favor of it. That's very different than what majority of world Jewry may now think about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. There may be a great majority that says yes, and there may be some who say no. But again, if the question is asked in the context of how did we get to this moment, then you have to deal with Jerusalem as it was supposed to be adjudicated in the partition plan of 1947. It's supposed to be an international zone. There's no way a class in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or in St. Louis, Missouri, or in Atlanta, Georgia, is going to be able to come up with the right answer on how Jerusalem should be dealt with in the present context. I mean, I don't think this current administration knows exactly when and how it's going to do it, if it's going to do it, or what the implications and ramifications are going to be. You asked, whoever posed the question asked a very important question conceptually, and that is, topics are usually addressed based on what a person understands is in the news today, and somehow assumes that the person who has a historical knowledge has an answer. I don't have an answer. I don't think anyone in the Obama administration, or anyone in the Clinton administration, or anyone in the Trump administration has an answer on what the impact is going to be of the move to Jerusalem. In fact, it's a wonderfully open-ended question for an educator to put out there and say, I'd like two people to take two different points of view. Someone to take the point of view that it should be, and someone should take the point of view that it shouldn't be. And I tell you what, let's make this an area of discussion when we meet the second or third time. Lay it out there in the first session. Let's come back in 2 weeks or 10 days or whenever we meet again, and let's have an open-ended discussion of it. That's the way people are going to learn.
Great. I hate to return to, I think in some ways already answered this question, but there seem to be so many people concerned about it that I want to read a comment by Rabbi Serge Lippy from Brooklyn Heights, because again, in our communities, we're going to be wrestling with this tension between left and right and how to make it not painful and divisive, but to make it educational. So Rabbi Lippy's comment is this: I'm concerned that I've already heard from right-wing members of my community that the advertising that ARZA created, so maybe it's our fault, doesn't seem to acknowledge that Israel's response in the war was a preemptive response based on a desire to destroy Israel, and therefore Israel was the victor of yet another attempt to destroy her. What I hear in this question is, we've got left-wing voices in our community, and in this particular community, we have a right-wing or right-wing voices that are going to be challenging to the facilitator. Give us a sense of how to respond to that.
So I knew the rabbi was going to ask this question, so I prepared the answer in advance. So there's a whole notion in political science about what is preemption, what is the doctrine of preemption, and when is preemption required. So this is as it's applied by Israel in its history. And then that's a glossary example for the learner and a glossary example for the leader. And here is how it was applied in Israeli history, where Israel has applied a doctrine of preemption previously. Now we know Israel did not react, not preempt, to the Scud attack in 1981. We know that for certain. So for the questions, what's the difference between preemption and retaliation? When is preemption justified? And I think that it's a wonderful question to pose. You have to ask yourself basically the golden rule turned upside down. Do unto others as they would do unto you, but do unto others before they would do unto you. Now that can open up a Pandora's box of discussion for 45 minutes. At what point do we as Jews, should we be responsible for saving ourselves? And at what point do we turn the other cheek? Golda Meir turned the other cheek in 1973. And it cost Israel dear. Maybe the consequences are what cost Israel deal. And it's certainly possible to compare preemption in 67 with non-preemption in 73. And that's a learning moment. And that's, I hope, in the unit, myself and my peers have contemplated some of the questions which may evolve that people are going to say, should there be settlements or should there not be settlements? Well, we know that a Pew study done in September of last year pointed out that when Israelis were asked, are the settlements in Israel's security interest, 63% of Israelis that were polled said yes, but only 9% of Americans said yes. American Jews said yes. So there's a very different perception on what the settlements mean, depending upon whether you're an Israeli Jew or an Israeli or an American. Now that's an important distinction to make. And that I think should be put before the audiences. What comes out of this, Neil, is that these issues are not simple. They are highly complex. And they require thought and not one-liners. I hope that helps.
Great. So with that, it's about 2:47. First of all, Ken, I want to say Yasher Koach and thank you to you. Our agenda said at this point we were going to turn it over to your colleague, Rich Walter, who's going to describe some next steps about how to order the curriculum, when it'll be available, and what we need to know as next steps. You know, certainly it's my hope that everybody on the call is certainly more informed now than we were 45 minutes ago, a little bit, that we learned a few things about the fallout of the war, but also about what it is that we're offering here. And I hope that everyone on the call is even more enthusiastic I know that I am, as a rabbi, excited not only to teach this curriculum, but also to have this material in my library for years to come, which is incredibly and invaluable. So thank you. Let's turn it over to Rich to tell us about next steps about ordering.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Judy. And thank you, Neil. Thank you all for on the call.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rich Walter. I'm the Director of Education here for CIE, and just wanted to share with you guys the process of ordering the curriculum. It's a very basic process. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to open up our website. Okay. So you should see the CIE website on your screens, I hope. Oh, I'm sorry, it's on the wrong screen. Now you should be seeing the CIE website on your screen. Just wanted to share with you how simple it is. It's here in products. You just need to go down to our store. And ooh, it's not there for some reason. Okay. Give me 1 second. I think our webmaster's actually working on it right now. To fix
we will send out the link to everybody.
Okay. But the basic thing is there's basically 2 steps that you'll need to know in terms of ordering it. The first is the Leader's Guide, which we priced with ARZA's consultation based on the size of your congregation. So you'll need to choose the appropriate size of your congregation. And then the second component will be whether or not the congregation or you as the leader are going to be purchasing the participants' guides for all of the participants, or whether you want your participants to be able to order their own. It'll be a very simple drop-down menu that will allow you to do both. Oh, I'm told if I refresh. Cool. And here it is. So instead of store, it's right under products. And again, you can see here what it would be like to add it to your cart. You would choose your option, large congregation, small congregation, and then we have another option for Hillel schools and student organizations. So if you're a large congregation, you would click the large congregation. And then as I mentioned, are you purchasing the participant books? Yes. And then if yes, you can just enter the number right here. Everything will automatically populate. If no, you just click no. And reset this to 0. And then you can add it to your cart. And at this point, since it's a pre-order, you'll be checking out. And once the materials are available next month, we will be sending them out. Everything is delivered electronically, meaning that you would then get an electronic piece in terms of being able to download it to a PDF format. The reason that we do it electronically is to keep our costs as low as possible, and B, as Ken mentioned, there'll be several links that are embedded throughout. So if somebody has it, it's available to be printed, but if you want to access several of the links to many of the different resources which Ken just showed, then that's one of the reasons why you'll be able to do that from the document electronically. So I think that's very self-explanatory. It is available now for pre-order. We have had several pre-orders from a number of congregations, and this will be available not just for pre-order, but really in perpetuity over the next year, if not more.
Great. Rich, can you answer? I got one or two more questions about
I just saw the question about previewing the entire curriculum before purchase. Yeah, we don't do that typically, and I would say the answer to that is no. If there are specific questions that individuals have about content, we can certainly answer those. Your best bet is to send us an email at info@israeled.org, but it is not our practice to preview entire products before we make them available.
Thank you. So we'll be sending a follow-up to everybody on the call, but here in the waning moments of it, I just want to say one or two words of thanks and gratitude to Ken and Rich and everybody at CIE who have done such an extraordinary job putting this material together. You have our gratitude and our thanks.
Neil, if there was a question about videos, the answer is yes. There'll be a list of videos that will be suggested. If anyone's interested in doing their own homework between now and if they order anything, all they have to do is go to YouTube and go to and type in the June War and find a YouTube video that's an hour and 53 minutes long. It sounds daunting. It is by far the best documentary on the Six-Day War, both from the Egyptian, the Jordanian, and the Israeli and the American viewpoint. It is an amazing document. It's an amazing video. And if anyone just does that in conjunction with the unit, they will have a wonderful pictorial representation of what happened in May and June, and going back to post-Suez, 1967, and taking it down to Nasser's death in 1970. It's on YouTube, June 67 War. Find the one that's an hour and 53 minutes long.
Great. Great. I was saying some words of thanks, Ken, to you and your whole team, including Rabbi Ellen Nemhauser, by the way, who has been in this conversation from the very beginning with me and with Rabbi Judy Schindler as well. And our thanks to Judy, who pushed this as an agenda item early on, saying this is something that the ARZA Rabbinic Council should take on. So our thanks to Judy and to her partner, Rob Nosenchuk, her partner in co-chairing the ARZA Rabbinic Council, and to Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who is the indefatigable president of ARZA as well, who green-lighted all this. Josh, you want to say anything to the group? Without the mute. Nice. Rabbi Weinberg, anything? You take the mute off?
Sorry, my computer froze here. Again, thank you so much. And please, don't, if you're having questions about the curriculum or how to use it or anything like that, either technical logistical issues or content issues, please don't hesitate to contact us and talk to us. This is the first time that we're doing something like this, and we hope that it will be successful, of course. But we don't want, if you have one question to say, oh, we didn't want to use it because of this one issue. Talk to us. Let's see what we can do. We want to, we want it to be a resource for you. We want Reform Jews to be thinking about these issues. We want Israel to be a sacred part of every Jew's identity, and that's what we're hoping to do. So join us, and hopefully we'll have great discussion. And especially once you've taught it, we'd love to hear your feedback and to hear what's going on. And by the way, myself, Neil, Judy, and of course all the wonderful staff of the CIE are available for consult and questions along the process, not just before diving into this. So again, toda rabba, and I hope everyone's doing well and looking forward to learning together.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That was great.
Thank you, Judy.
You did a wonderful job.
Well, we'll see what happens.